Okay, so this will be the last talk, the last day. Um, it might be a little long. I'd love for this talk to be a little bit shorter because I feel like on the last day, like there's always you're kind of just like ready to get out. Your bags are packed and everyone's sort of like checked out a bit. And I know I'm wondering that might just be me as a leader, my posture, which sucks, but. Anyways, I'm trying to keep this one a little bit short. There's no like personal story or introduction or anything. But yeah, so and like I'm open to changing this around, maybe finishing the story of Jairus's story, because that story is, we kind of leave it hanging in the second talk, which I think I'll actually go back into that one and finish that in that story just kind of really quickly. But anyway, here we go. All right, hey guys, what an incredible weekend. Like this Oakbridge, man, I know I say this every time, but I love this place. And it is so great to get a chance to get out and just get away from everything and kind of be around your friends and your young life leaders and make new friends and have adventures and just get to do stuff that you don't normally get to do. So I hope you guys had an incredible weekend. I hope that you guys really got a chance to really sit and talk and think about Jesus and who he is. I hope maybe this weekend has been a time where you've gotten to know Jesus in like a different way or to a different extent than you knew him before. Maybe you were like me when I met my wife Candace, how I kind of thought I knew what she was like. I kind of thought like I'd heard about her and I thought I wasn't going to be into her. Maybe you came into this weekend like that, but then you like about Jesus, but then you started hearing about Jesus and you started hearing about him in a way that man wasn't like how you thought. And I hope maybe that you got to meet him while you were here and realize that he's so much better than any of us can even imagine. Like he's better than I can imagine right now. Maybe you're like Zacchaeus and you felt like totally alone and that everyone hated you. Maybe you just felt like you didn't deserve a friend and the idea that Jesus would come for you and call you out of that tree and invite you to be his friend, go over to your house and hang out with you. Maybe you feel like that. Maybe you're a little bit like the woman who is bleeding, who's forgotten, who no one cared about, who was unclean and just ashamed and totally alone. And Jesus wanted to enter into her life and hear her story. And Jesus healed her and made her clean. I mean, that's powerful. And maybe you can relate to that. You know, we talked about Jesus doing Jesus-y things and how Jesus is like just on another level, like for real on another level. And he would touch people and they could, like blind people could see and people that couldn't walk could not only walk, but they could like dance and skip and jump and do whatever they wanted. How like he would make people hear who couldn't hear and how he just sort of made things right. Like he would touch stuff and make it the way that it was supposed to be. And guys, he didn't only do that back then, but he does that still now. Like he touches our lives and begins to make our lives the way that they were supposed to be. Last night we talked about how sin just kind of separates us from God and how because of sin that we just end up turning our backs on God and running away from him. But how Jesus decided to take all that away. How Jesus took all of our sin and the consequences from our sin and he died on a cross. He died a painful death on a cross for us because he loved us enough to enter into our mess, to get our mess on him, to get fully covered in our mess so that we didn't have to. And this story the story of Jesus would really kind of be a tragedy if that's where it ended. It would be a sad story if the story of Jesus ended on the cross. But guys, it doesn't end there. You know how I talked about like Jesus did, like they didn't beat Jesus. Like they didn't like put Jesus on the cross against his will. How he went there willingly. How he was strong enough that he could have in an instant like flipped the script and switched the situation around. Well, he's so strong that like death couldn't even beat him. Like, he died. He really died. He was dead. They even stabbed him in the side with a spear just to make sure he was dead. And then they buried him in a tomb. And they sealed it up because there were rumors that Jesus was going to maybe like come back to life. But no, that's just not how it works. So the people back then were like, oh, I bet some of his disciples are going to come and like steal his body and then start these rumors that he came back to life. So they not only like buried him in a tomb, but they like sealed the tomb up with this giant rock so that like it would take an army to move this thing and get the body out. And so they just wanted to make sure that none of those rumors would be true. But that wasn't enough. 3 days later, Jesus defeated death, and Jesus came back to life. And guys, that is incredible news. That is what Jesus does. He makes dead things come back to life. And because Jesus came back to life, now we get to enter into life. We get to come into real life. Like Jesus says, I have come so that you may have life and life to the fullest. And we get to follow him into that. I want to tell a couple stories of things that happened after Jesus had come back to life. Because that's just crazy. And it's not like he came back to life and like there's no stories about it or like that's just a rumor. But like he came back to life and spent time with people. The first one I want to talk about is this woman, Mary. Mary, not Jesus' mom, but one of his closest friends. She was deeply in love with Jesus. Jesus had rescued her, and she loved Jesus. And there are a lot of stories in the Bible about Mary and Jesus, and she was just like a sister to Jesus, and she could not believe that Jesus was dead. So she comes over on the third day. She comes to where they had buried Jesus because she wanted to just kind of show her respect and mourn him. I mean, she was just brokenhearted. And so she comes to the tomb, and something totally unexpected happens. It says Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And the first thing is, like, the tomb was open. Like that giant stone that I talked about, how they sealed it up, like that was not on the doorway anymore, and Mary could look in there. And when she looked in, she saw that there was no body. The body of Jesus was gone. And so she's like, "Oh my gosh!" Like something they couldn't even just leave him alone. Like they like that, it wasn't enough for them to kill him. They took him and they took him somewhere. And so she's weeping, and she looks in and she sees two angels. And the Bible says they're clothed in white. And they're sitting where the body of Jesus once was. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Oh, come on. Like, that's the most obvious question in the world. I mean, they knew. That's super obvious. And she says, "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." So she's just crushed. She says, "They've taken away Jesus, my everything, my Lord." Jesus was everything to Mary. He was the person who had entered into her life and loved her in a way like no one else had ever loved her. And the idea that Jesus was gone was more than she could bear. And she was completely brokenhearted. All hope was gone. And now she doesn't even know where his body is. Like she thinks like the Roman government or the people who killed Jesus have like taken his body and are like doing who knows what with it. And she's just like, I can't believe, I don't even know where he's laying. And then right when she said this, she turned around. Like she probably just glanced, I might have seen something over here. And she turns around. And Jesus was standing there. But she didn't know it was Jesus. She just saw his figure standing there. And he said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Who are you seeking?" Again, obvious. But I think that's just how Jesus is. He just enters into our situation. Like, he wants to know. He doesn't assume that he knows. He like wants to hear what we have to say. He wants to know what's going on. And so even now, he's asking Mary, like, what's going on? Why are you crying? And she's like, Like, she's so brokenhearted. And it says she doesn't even recognize him. Like, she thought he was a gardener. And so she thought maybe he knows. And she says, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have taken him, and I will go to him." She's like this is something that's kind of weird. Like, how did she not recognize that it was Jesus? But I don't know if you've ever had something happen that's so bad in your life that you just were crying, like, all night long. Your eyes, like, are all puffy and they get crusty, and you're so brokenhearted that you're just not really thinking straight. Also, it was like the morning time, so maybe when she turns around, like, the sun's behind Jesus. I don't know what happens, but for some reason she doesn't recognize Jesus. And she's just broken-hearted, just broken. And she's like, "Where? Please just tell me where he is." And Jesus says her name. And Jesus said to her, "Mary." And Mary turned around to him and recognized him right away. And it says she said, "Rabboni," which means teacher, which is one of the ways they called him rabbi. Like, he was their teacher. And she ran up to him, and he said, "Don't touch me yet, don't touch me. But go and tell all my friends that I'm back. Go and tell all of my brothers and tell them that I am back." Like, I can't imagine what that must have been like for Mary. I mean, all of a sudden, it went from death to life. Like, she went from totally brokenhearted, just like all hope is lost. Her favorite person in the world had just been killed in this really terrible, brutal way. All hope was gone, and then now he's back. Not only is he back, but he called her name. There's just this way, guys, right? Where someone can say your name, and if this person, like, really, really knows you, and you know that they're really into you, and they know you and they love you, like, a lot, and they can have this way of saying your name that it just brings immediate comfort, where, like, you just all of a sudden know you're home. Like my wife, Candace, she can say my name sometimes in a way that just, like, man, I know it's gonna be okay, because I know she loves me, and I know she's with me, and she's not gonna leave. I bet that when Jesus said Mary's name, it was that, but, like, on another level. It was enough that Mary instantly knew who Jesus was. She knew it was going to be okay. She went from just crushed, sad beyond description, to full of life and joy. You guys, you got to know this. Jesus he knows each of you, and he's calling your name in the same way that he called Mary. And right now, I'll like, hopefully I've learned some names and say some kids' names. But he knows you completely. He knows you completely, and he loves you. He loves you more than you will ever understand. And he is calling your name because he wants you to know that it's going to be okay, that he is here and he is with you, that he died for you and he's come back, and he wants to be your friend. He wants to be in a relationship with you, a relationship that can bring life to the full, because that's what Jesus does. There's another story. So this happens with Mary, and Mary goes back and she tells everyone, and people, like, can't believe it, and Jesus shows up a couple times. But there's this one guy who just always seems to be in the wrong place. Like, he's never there. He's always, like, out buying food or paying the bill or something whenever Jesus comes and sees all of his friends. This guy named Thomas. And nowadays he's often known as Doubting Thomas. I kind of think he gets a bad rap, because I'm pretty sure that if I was there and I was Thomas and I had, like, missed Jesus every time he came back, I would start to doubt too. Like, I'd be like, yeah, sure, okay, I was gone and he showed up again, right? Like, you guys are tripping. That's too good to be true. There's no way. There's no way. And so this one time Jesus shows up when Thomas is there, because I don't think Jesus, like, holds that stuff against us, because that's just kind of, like, normal. It seems too good to be true, and Jesus, I think he understands that. And so he shows up on purpose one time when Thomas is there. And it says 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with him. Like, it's a big deal. This time Thomas is there. And although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them. So all of a sudden, like, Jesus is just there in the room with them. And they're like, oh. And he says, peace be with you, because I bet they were freaking out. And then he looks at Thomas. Doubting Thomas, the guy who doesn't believe. And he calls Thomas up and he says, hey Thomas, come and put your finger here in my hands. And put your hand in my side where they stabbed me to make sure I was dead. And see that I'm really here. Don't disbelieve, but believe. Guys, he came to Thomas. He came to doubting Thomas because he wanted Thomas to understand that he was back. Like, he didn't hold that against Thomas. It wasn't like, oh, you don't believe? You don't, like, peace. Like, you're out of here. You're not part of the crew anymore. No, he wanted to make sure Thomas knew. He let Thomas touch his scars where the nails had been and feel where they stabbed him in the side to make sure he was really dead. And he told Thomas, hey, don't disbelieve, but believe. And then he said something even crazier. He said, you're believing because you've seen, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Guys, he's talking about us. He's talking about us. Like, we weren't there in that room. But we have the chance to believe. Believe in all of this. Because it's true. There's one more person. I don't know if you guys remember, last night I talked about his buddy Peter. How Peter was one of his closest friends. And they had a campfire. And we still have the setup right here. It's campfire. And when Jesus was in the high priest's courtyard, just being mocked and beaten and put through this fake trial, when Jesus was about to die, right before he went to the cross, Peter was right there. And when Jesus needed him the most, Peter totally bailed. Like, just bailed on Jesus. Said he didn't even know him 3 times. Said he didn't know him 3 times and then ran away. Well, Jesus wanted to make sure Peter also knew that it was going to be okay. So here's the scene. The disciples, most of the disciples, before they followed Jesus and were known as the disciples, they were fishermen. They fished. That's what they did. And so they're like, hey, I don't know what we're going to do now. Let's go fishing. Like, let's do what we did before. And so they fished all night long and they caught nothing. All night long and they caught nothing. And I bet they were not only like irritated because we fish, you don't catch anything, it's super boring and feels like a waste of time. But I bet they were a little bit like, dude, we suck at this too now. Jesus is dead, and whatever we thought was going to happen with that didn't happen. And I don't know what's happening with him. Like, he's coming back, but I don't know what's going on. And now we're also like, we're not good at fishing. Like, we've spent all night long and we didn't catch a single thing. And it's right about morning time. And I'm just going to read the story because it's incredible. And so it says, just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. But the disciples, they couldn't see that it was Jesus. It was probably like a little bit of mist. And he's kind of far away, and it's just his figure. And they don't recognize that it's Jesus. This happens a lot. Like, people just don't recognize Jesus after he comes back. I think because they can't believe it's true. And he calls out to them, children, do you have any fish? Hey, guys, do you guys got any fish? And they call back and they say, no. And I bet they're like, freaking, this guy, he's just, no, we don't have any fish. We fished all night and we don't have any fish. And so he said to them, hey, why don't you try casting your net on the other side of the boat? Which, like, I don't think that would make that much of a difference. There's not more fish on one side of the boat than the other. That seems kind of ridiculous. But I think they were just so over it that they tried it. They did it. And all of a sudden they caught way more fish. So many fish that they couldn't even pull the net into the boat. Like, it was too heavy. They couldn't get up into the boat. And one of Jesus' disciples, this guy named John, looks at Peter and he's like, hey, that's Jesus. That's Jesus right there. And Peter jumps into the water and swims over to Jesus. I think Peter wasn't okay with the way things had left, because Peter had just bailed on him, and I think Peter wanted to really get a chance to get in front of Jesus and like talk it out and be like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know what happened. I thought I was stronger than that. I thought I would stay by your side, but I didn't, and I'm so sorry. And when Peter comes up to the shore, he sees a familiar sight. There's a fire there. And Jesus is roasting some fish on this fire. And Jesus invites Peter, and then when the other disciples get there, to have some breakfast. He's like, hey, bring over some of those fish. Let's have some breakfast right now. And so they're sitting around the fire, eating some fish. And this is something that had just happened like a few days ago. Peter was sitting around a fire with some people. But that time Peter had denied even knowing Jesus because he was afraid. This time, Jesus starts to ask him questions. Kind of like the other time when people were asking Peter, like, hey, you're one of these guys, you know him. And Peter's like, no, I don't know this guy. Jesus starts to ask questions. And he asked Peter, hey, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's like, yeah, Jesus, I love you. And then again, he's like, hey, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's like, oh, Jesus, yeah, I love you. You know I love you. And then it happens a third time. I want to read it. Jesus says a third time, Simon, son of John. So he calls him by his proper name, his full name. Do you love me? And the Bible says Peter got sad because Jesus said it a third time, like everything came back, like it was like it hit just too close to home. Everything rushed right back to Peter, and Peter realized, like, oh man, this happened before. And Peter says, Lord Jesus, you know everything. You know that I love you. Peter actually started to believe that Jesus loved him just the way he was. Peter was a guy that, like, up until this point, like, it just seems like he was constantly trying to prove that he deserved Jesus's love. He constantly seemed to, like, be wanting to be the best and trying to prove that, like, he was worth it. And then when he failed, when he denied Jesus, it was like, man, I bet Peter didn't even know what to do. And around this fire, he realizes, like, Jesus knows, and it's okay. And Peter tells Jesus, you know I love you. You guys, this is how Jesus is. Like, he knows us. He knows every part of us. There is nothing that we have done or will do that will shock Jesus. There's nothing that we can do that will make Jesus like, oh, yeah, like, ugh, I'm good with a lot, but that's just too much. Peace. Like, Jesus is not like that. He knows us completely, and he loves us completely. He loves us perfectly in a way like no one else can. And in a way that we will learn more and more about how much he loves us for the rest of our lives. Like I've known Jesus for a bit, and I'm still, like, shocked because I find out all the time new ways of how much Jesus loves me. Like, even the process of getting ready for this camp, like, Jesus kept pouring his love into me and reminding me how much he knows me and how much he really, really loves me. And guys, like, I'm not perfect at all. I'm not even, like, close to perfect. I'm a mess. I'm a screw up. And he loves me. And he won't ever stop loving me. Guys, that is what Jesus does. And that relationship, this life in relationship with Jesus is a life that is just full. And it's good. And it will continue on forever. Remember, we talked about how the wages of sin were death, but the free gift of God is everlasting life in relationship with him through Jesus. And that's what I want to invite you guys into right now. I don't know where you were at before you came here, but today I want to invite you into a relationship with Jesus. Maybe for the first time. Maybe some of you guys feel like you've met Jesus for the first time this weekend. Maybe some of you guys came here kind of knowing about Jesus, but you sort of were ignoring him. Or like Peter, I kind of denied him and walked away. But you kind of met him again this weekend. And I thought maybe, I want that relationship back. I'm gonna say a prayer right now, and if you have decided to accept God's gift of Jesus and a relationship with Him today, I want you guys to pray this prayer in your heads with me. And then afterwards, we're gonna go out and we're gonna have cabin time together. Just all your area is gonna be in cabin time together. And I want you to tell your leaders if you prayed this prayer with me. It's important for your leaders to know that you said yes to Jesus this weekend, because they have also said yes to Jesus. And the best thing about this whole thing is, like, we don't do it alone. We do it with other people. And we get to follow Jesus with other people. And your leaders really want to follow Jesus with you. So I'm going to pray this prayer, and then we're going to go on cabin times and just follow your leaders to wherever you guys are going to have your cabin time. All right? So we'll pray the prayer, and then I'll dismiss everyone.